This time on the Prop Master, well, technically, we finished the jetpack. That's right, not only do we finish doing any last minute changes on here, but we get the whole thing sanded, cleaned up, and even primered. I mean, it's a big day. And on that positive note, for all you that are out there that really like the shorter format that comes out more often, I'm sorry. So yeah, it's a long video, but we get so much done. It's totally worth it. We got to do some things that we kind of knew we were going to have to do. Sanded this thing all really well. We did some experiments that we learned quite a bit from that will help us quite a bit in the future. We sanded this some more, and we took some risks, which really paid off in the end. And then we sanded this a little bit more because there's a whole lot of sanding that goes on here. But the result, just look. I'm so excited to finally see this all one color where I can see what it really looks like and not just, see what it kind of looks like because I'm thrown off by dark lines and highlights and things like that that really make it hard to understand what I'm looking at. So definitely excited. This is the part of the video where I'm going to beg you to interact with the video, like always. Like, subscribe, please leave a comment. But you already know all that stuff, so I'm going to leave it right there. And with that out of the way, like I said, we got a lot done. And if I'm going to show it to you, we better get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to deal with is the fact that there's big holes down between all of these pieces here. And there's a couple of ways we can go about filling those voids up. In the end, what we want this to be is just a nice, clean, flat-sided piece that, of course, fits, follows right along with this circular tube right here. What I did on the prototype was I just put caulk in there until it started to build back up to the top and then smoothed everything off. And that's not a bad way of doing it. It has held up on the prototype without any problem. But I kind of like the idea of using the CA glue and baking soda on this so that I've got a nice hard sandable surface here. Plus that'll, help hold this whole thing together as glue. Granted, the caulk will do the same thing. The caulk actually grabs quite well, but the CA glue, basically make this one piece a little better than the caulk will, I believe. And like I said, if you want to use the caulking on this to fill in this area, you can just take something small, like a coat hanger, and use this to shove little bits of paper towel into there to kind of fill that void up. But if you want to use the baking soda and CA glue, you're going to have to fill this thing up completely. If there's any gaps at all, it's just going to run straight through here and out the bottom. And so I'm going to use some of this expandable foam. Slower would be good. That's the tightest one. These I can actually put it down on the bottom. You want to be a little bit aggressive with it because you want it to fill in, you want it to build up enough pressure that it fills in the gaps all the way around before it expands up and down. And the drill from before, avoid, I really want to try to clean this up. Don't do it. I will clean this up a little bit though. Still got some foam on there. Okay, this actually seems okay. I don't think I'm going to need it in the back. Maybe a little bit. Okay, now I get to wait for a couple of hours and see what this looks like. You'll have to do the same thing with the bottom as well. That's just a lot harder to show on camera because I'm gonna have to stack this whole thing upside down and probably put it in a trash can or something else that I can support this without, the rocket laying on the ground. But once this cures, I'll be back. Actually, I decided that wasn't fair. Let me go ahead and see if I can show you the bottom side of this. I mean, it's really essentially the same, but I think by turning it on its side like this, I can probably make this work. Okay, now hopefully that will all expand and fill up any gaps. Otherwise, I'll have to go back and do a little bit of work on filling any voids. And now we'll actually be back when this is all cured. Okay, it's only been about 45 minutes, but I think this is probably set up already. I tested some of the stuff that spilled out onto the ground. Not completely, some of it is still a little soft. Yeah, it's mostly cured, but there's a little bit right here in the middle that's a little soft, so I'll give it another 15-20 minutes. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. Let's just take a look. That's good. That's a little soft still in the middle, although it's not sticky. That's a little soft. I think that must have just popped up from where I pulled the last one off. It's a little bit sticky. I really hate this stuff. It's like it sticks to your hands and then it's impossible to remove. And it's worse than super glue as far as taking off. It just sticks to your fingers and stays there all night. Okay, I'm gonna give that a little bit of time to see if it puffs back up again. And remember, I'm not really wanting this to be a smooth surface. I just need something to be filling those gaps up enough that when I put the baking soda in there, it doesn't just fall down to the bottom. But I'll give that 10 minutes or so just to see if anything grows out of that, and then we can go on to the next step. Okay, I'm back and there's no more growth here, so I'm guessing that it's fully cured. Now when I did the other side, I filled this all up with baking soda and CA glue, and then I went over that with some caulking, and I had this really nice kind of a slope from this outside edge up to here, and it looked great. But then I looked at some photos of the actual jetpack and it doesn't do that at all. It's really sort of a 90-degree angle, from here in and then to the side of the pipe is 90 degrees. So that's what we're going to do here. I had to remove all of the caulking from the other side, and it was a little bit of a mess, but that's how we learn. So what I want to do is I just want to clean this up a little bit so that there's actually some room for the baking soda. Also, I want there to be enough of a gap that this can help to glue this whole thing together nicely. And for the most part, I'm just pushing this down into the hole. Now I don't want to fill this all the way to the top in one shot because the CA glue will only penetrate a small amount of that and it'll just be powder underneath. So I want to kind of build this up a little bit. Now I'm just spreading it out a little bit. I've just got my little brush here, and I'm going to brush any excess off. And if I've got a little too much in there, I can use the brush to move it around a little bit too. And our thin CA glue. We're just going to drip that in. So be careful when you get above it because you don't want to breathe in those fumes. They're kind of harsh. Now, I've got a paper towel and I'm just going to try to get any excess CA glue. Move fast. If you stay one spot, it will glue it down. And now I'm going to hit it with a little bit of zip kicker so that I don't have any excess super glue. Wipe up any excess of the zip kicker. And then I'm going to start all over again. And hopefully I can make this take about 3 or 4 layers to build up to the top. And make sure that you don't use a paper towel that you've used to clean up the zip kicker to try to clean off the super glue because it will instantly glue down if you do that. There's a couple of places that I don't know if I got super glue. Get a bit of a zip there, a little bit of a drip there that I'm gonna have to sand off later. In this back corner, you want to make sure that you fill up this big gap that's back in this corner. And there is a fairly big gap there because this inside piece can't go all the way in to fit perfectly. So where it ends, there's kind of a big gap there. Got some spots that are sticking up, which can happen. So I've got like where some of the super glue and baking powder kind of make a little sharp stalagmite there. It makes it kind of hard to put the rest of the stuff in. Got a similar thing here in the back. I just wanted to clean up some of the baking powder that was building up underneath here, so if the baking soda that was building up there, because if I got a drip that went down here, I didn't want it to mess up my surface. So you can use one that you use to clean up the super glue on the zip kicker, just don't do it the other way around. After I do this, I'll throw this away. Okay, I didn't realize that super glue was there. I'll have to clean that up. I should say I didn't realize that baking soda was there. This can show you how strong that combination is. Okay, let's do one more layer, a couple of these lower spots, It may be difficult to make it perfectly flat because your baking soda tries to fall off. So get it as far as you can, and then if there's a little bit of an indentation here or there, we can fill that with caulking at the very end. Really just have these areas right in here where it's a little bit low. But like I said, you also don't want it to slope upward, because if you get that, you're gonna have to sand it down. Trying to get that balance where it's just 90 degrees straight out. This is all pretty good up here. Maybe this right here needs to have a little. Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, I think what it was doing, it was kind of sloping down, which didn't look bad, but I mean, we put quite a bit there, so. Now I'm making a big mess. But that's easy to fix. Just be careful when you get that much super glue. If you soak it up and you stick this paper to my finger, the paper will set it off and it will burn you. So it's not something I'm too worried about, but be aware of it. I should not have done that. Let me hit it with Zip Kicker first, because I have stuck my finger onto some of this stuff where there's a lot of super glue left and pretty much glued myself down while it was burning. Extremely high temperature. So that's why I hit it with a Zip Kicker before I start touching it to see if it's level. I think that's pretty good. There's maybe a low spot right there. I don't know if it's a low spot or if it's a high spot on the Centra. I think maybe it's a high spot. So now that we have this filled up, we can start to make everything smooth. I know when you look at this, it looks like there's a big gap here, but there's really not. I'm trying to keep this as sort of level as I can so that I'm not putting a slope into the Centra. Okay, I'm going to continue to refine this a little bit, which just is what I'm saying to say I'm going to sand this for another 15 minutes or so, just to make sure that everything is flat. And when I'm done with that, I'll be back. Okay, I thought I better show you how to do this part, or at least how I do it. You can do it however you can, make it work for you. I've just got a large trash can. I can set this in there so that the ends of the pipes kind of hit the edge of the trash can on both sides. And then I've just got a piece of foam rubber, which I've got wedged in there to keep it from falling forward. And that actually holds it quite well. And you can see I've got this area here, and I'm just going to repeat the process that I just did, except I'm going to do it with the bottoms here. So you've seen it already. I'm not going to do anything different. So I'm going to do this part and clean it up, and then we can get on with the process. I've cleaned all of this up as nicely as I can. It's all pretty smooth, and I've gotten all of the stuff off of the aluminum tube that I could. And I've cleaned up all the edges as well as I could. And mostly I've just sanded everything pretty well. Make sure I got all the drips of super glue off of here where it dripped down. So I can go ahead and put some caulking on here. The reason why I'm doing that is if I feel along here, I can feel that there's still an occasional little dip, like right here. It's going to be really difficult to get the baking soda to just lay in there the way I want it to fill in that little divot. It's at this angle, it's going to tend to run down off the sides and stuff. Plus there are just little bitty tiny little pits that are going to be really difficult to sand. I'll have to sand a lot of material off to get those smooth. It'd be a lot easier just to put a very small layer of caulking down over the top of this. Plus, this is doing its job the way it is. This is adding a lot more glue surface area between these pieces and the tube. Before we had some, I believe, hot glue down the middle of each one of these, and then they of course were glued together quite well. But now we have, you know, a reasonably large area where there's going to be some glue all the way around here, making sure this whole thing holds together really well. Needless to say, I'm a little bit affected by the my left gauntlet coming off at the last con, so I wanted to make sure that everything is very secure. This pretty much whole thing is held together with glue for the most part, so I want to make sure that it's got the best chance of you know, staying in one piece. But with that, you know, being there to glue and hold everything, make it secure, I still want to make it nice and smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little thin layer of caulking over everything. I don't want it to, you know, make a slope here or anything. I want to try to keep it as flat as possible, but I just want to fill in any gaps. Like I can feel that there's a little bit of a gap right there, all the way around. And to do that, I'm using this DAP Alex Fast Dry. I really like this stuff for one reason. It's paintable, and it's paintable within 20 minutes of when I put it on there. It seems to cure rather quickly. Granted, in 20 minutes, if I went in there and pushed on it, it would still be soft and I would mess things up. But you can easily, you know, paint over the top of it and stuff like that. And within an hour or two, it'll be fully cured. Well, I'll take that back. It's probably not fully cured, but it's cured enough that you can handle it without messing it up. Now, as well as having the Alex Fast Dry, I've got a little jar of water here, and that's what I'm going to use to smooth things up with my finger. So I'm just going to take my caulk and I'm just going to put a little bit, aiming for the corner where these, you know, everything meets. And I'm just going to put a small amount. I'm not going for pretty here. I'm basically just putting the material on here. I'm going to move it and shape it afterwards. Okay. The other thing that you're going to need is a large roll of paper towels, because you're going to want to get rid of the excess caulk that's on your fingers. Okay, with this in place, I'm just going to dip my finger into the water, and I'm just going to tap this down flat. This, by the way, is a good way to simulate a weld. If you're doing a prop that has a little welded area, this does a great job of that. Now it's kind of sticking to my finger. That means I need to put more water. I need to re-dip my finger. And don't be nervous about this. This is this shouldn't be any pressure at all. There's no hurry for anything. You're not trying to make this perfect the first try. There's not a lot of skill involved or anything. We're just pushing this flat and trying to fill any gap that might be there. Okay, next I'm just going to once again dip my finger in the water, come back up, and I'm just going to try and smooth this around. Here's where you're going to come up with some material. Keep your finger well moistened, because that's what keeps, you're not trying to remove material. You don't want to remove it, you want to move it around. And that's what the water allows you to do. I can also take my towel and wipe up any excess water that's dripping around. Some areas have plenty of caulking and some are lacking, so we'll come back in a minute and add some more. And in the end, I want it to all pretty much look like this. There's a little bit of a slope there, but it's not too bad. Okay, and I'm going to give that 10 minutes or so to dry, and then we'll come take a look at it and then put some more on. I said it was easy, I didn't say it was fast. It's been about 30 minutes, and this is dry. We go ahead and put another coat on. This time I'm going to go sort of in the middle because I want to make sure that I get sort of an even coat over this entire thing. Still have the same basic spot right here where it kind of comes in and then dips down. I'm going to try to smooth that out a little bit. Everything else feels pretty smooth, but I want to make sure I've got a good coverage over this whole surface. I think this is probably pretty good. I don't need to put a lot there. I'm just putting some where I feel like it's needed. If you've already got a good smooth coat from the tube to the outside here, then you don't really need to add any. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I want to try and spread this out all the way across the whole face, or the whole top area. Get some more water on there. I'm kind of angling my finger this way so that I'm trying to, your finger's round, so there's no way you're going to be able to push that inside edge in, but I'm trying to do it as well as I can. And we're not, trying to seal anything up here, so as long as it looks good and smooth, that's all it needs to be. Sorry you can't see back here, but I'm just trying to smooth this out and kind of feather the edges. So unfortunately we can't sand this afterwards, so it's kind of, once it dries, that's what you get. You can always put some more on top of it and try to smooth it then, but you can't go back and sand afterwards. Got a little bit of a gap right here. I'm going to use my pinky because I can kind of get in there a little better. Now, make sure I don't touch the actual caulking itself. I just want to touch near it and pull some of that water away. Not sure what the best tool is going to be for this. Once that's painted, it won't be so jagged looking. I think this is still pretty good. I got a little bit of a spot right there that we need to do something about. Sorry, I'm gonna have to move this. Well, maybe you can see better this way. Okay. And you know the drill. We'll be back in about 30 minutes or so. This is looking pretty good now. There's a couple of little ridges. We might be able to still tap those down just a little bit. It's dried, but it's not completely cured yet. So mostly this looks pretty good. I don't know. This kind of dips down as the corner kind of rounds off. So I don't know how much of that is really something I can fix. That may have to just be sanded a little bit to take that little corner off. This all feels pretty good. I think that's going to take care of it for that. Of course, we still have to do the bottom as well. And of course, you could have skipped that whole process with the baking soda and just stuffed some, either used the foam or stuffed some paper into there and then used the caulk to begin with and do the whole thing in caulk. It's up to you. I wanted to make sure that there was extra strength. Once this is totally dry, I'll give it at least an hour. We can take a look at the bottom. So I'm back to the trash can with this upside down so that I can go ahead and do these. Now I think I've just realized that I've already done the other one of these on the bottom. And I think I just realized that I did the wrong side. So this is actually the opposite side to the top part that I just did. But I guess it doesn't really matter. For the bottom, we're not as worried about trying to smooth things out as much. You do want to pay close attention to some areas because it's really hard to get the baking soda on these side areas like this. So there tends to be gaps. So we want to make sure we fill those. But other than that, it's really just the same operation. It looks really dusty, but I guess it's okay. Now there I'll fill up that little gap, so that I wanted to make sure I got in there. Otherwise, it's probably better to get it on the middle of this, because when I started out here putting it up into that corner, I've got to now pull that out of that corner in order to make it smooth all the way across. So it's just a little bit more work. Whereas if it's like this, where it's in the middle, it's a little bit easier. And I want to try to maintain the shape of these pieces as well as I can. So I definitely would like to shape this so that this comes down to a little bit of a point and then back up again. And if you need to, don't be afraid of using something like this little stick to try and keep that, because right now it definitely is lower here than it is here. It's a bit of a slope there. So it doesn't look like it did very much, but it moved some material out of that actual corner. Getting a lot of liquid buildup here, which I guess is sort of the biggest problem with this part, because it all comes down to that point. So that's where all the water pools up. I've just got a little super cheap palette knife that came with my cheap brushes, and I just cut a little bit of a 90-degree angle in it on this side. So it's kind of a 90-degree angle here, and I kind of rounded that corner. But that's probably, I think, the best thing that I've found that I can use to kind of smooth things out into the corners. I don't really use it except for instances like this where I've got like a lot of it in the corner. Okay, there's not a lot there, but there is some there, and I'm going to let that dry off and we'll come back and do another layer. Okay, this is dried completely, and it actually turned out a lot better than I was expecting. It looks actually quite smooth everywhere. There's a couple little spots. This is a little rough here. Looks like there's a little bit right there. Everything else seems pretty good, so we'll just put a little bit more on and I think we'll be good. For this one, I'm not as worried about covering everything up. So I'm back to this tool here. Okay, doesn't look like much, but I think it's going to be fine. And once this dries up, we'll be pretty much done with this part of the build. Now that we've filled in the gaps that are in here in the bottom, we've got one last thing we need to do. And if you've noticed on the other one, there was a hole already drilled in here and there's not one on this side. And I was looking in the old videos and I don't see where I've actually drilled the hole before. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first thing we need to find is sort of the middle here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow the line from this corner right here. Sorry, this corner right here. I'm going to follow that line down and see if I can't mark that. So I'm just holding this up. I wish I could do it this way and not cover the camera. Let's try it and see what happens. So I can hold this up, running down the middle of that corner, and I'm just closing one eye and kind of aiming. And that looks pretty good from what I can tell. Like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to look right. And so I looked at it and made sure it looked right. Next, we want to just measure from the bottom here up. And we want to measure 1 9/16 of an inch, or about 39 millimeters, which I'm going to have to get down on the ground to do. Right about there. Plus or minus half a millimeter. And now we know where we can drill our hole. Okay, so what I have here is a little center punch. You might recognize this from earlier videos where I used a black version of this as that didn't work as the part of one of the knee pads. But I went out and got one that did work. And it's still, I mean, for a lot of things, I don't think this works very well, but for something like this, aluminum that's thin, I don't want to start pounding on this with a hammer and a center punch, so this works really well. But I want to find that center, and then it's just spring loaded. You push it until it gets to a certain tension, and then it lets that spring go, and it hammers this, you know, for you, so you can do it without hitting this whole thing with a hammer. But I have found that it usually takes a couple to really work well. So hopefully that will stop a small drill bit from moving around. And so I have a small drill bit. Its size is not really important. It's just a, maybe not the smallest drill bit that I've got, but it's, you know, one of the top, you know, smallest 3 probably. And let's see if we can drill into this. And it still moved around a bit. Okay, I think we finally ended up sort of in the middle there. Looks pretty good actually. Now I'm going to move to a 1/4 inch drill bit. If you're doing metric, you just want to make sure that it's as close to the size of the screw or bolt that you're using to hold the rocket thrusters on there. Because you don't want this to be sliding around at all. You want it to be, you know, pretty much exactly the same diameter as that screw or bolt, depending on which version of the thrusters you're going with. Okay. Here is the appropriate thruster, and more importantly, you can see how tightly that fits there, so it's not going to be moving at all on there. That's the way it's going to fit right there. That looks good. Now everything else that we're going to do to this is just a matter of getting it ready for paint. Okay, so technically this isn't getting it ready for paint, but it's the same process. I just need to sand off any rough areas and any sharp corners, but for this part down here, it actually needs to be rounded over quite a lot, more than just your average getting it ready for paint. In fact, I'd say probably you want to round this over to the extent where only the very bottom edge of the PVC is there, and then it starts curving to about 1/4 inch up here, and that is your sort of rounded off area. This looks to me like the amount of round it is sort of like an old scuba tank, kind of a rounded bottom. In fact, it's possible that we end up going all the way into the wood a little bit, but I don't want to do that because I don't have that here. In the actual prop, it is very much sort of a sharp edge where it comes out here and then immediately starts to curve in. So I think probably just, you know, eyeballing this at, you know, about that much. Somewhere around 1/4 inch. We just want to sort of round that whole thing over. And this sanding stick is probably not the right tool for this. I think probably my finger sander is probably the best thing, but a Dremel tool would also be, you know, fairly handy for this. A rasp would probably be a good idea. I don't know if something this aggressive would work or not, but let's see what happens. It's not great, but it's not bad either. This corner is going to be difficult with it though. Something like this microplane rasp is probably a better choice. My microplane rasp is a little bit abused. It doesn't work as well as it used to, but it's making fairly quick work of this. I think that if you had a finger sander and you had a microplane rasp, I think depending on where you keep your finger sander, you could probably have this done with the rasp faster than you could get out your finger sander, assuming that your rasp is easy at hand. Do a little bit of a comparison. I don't have a particularly aggressive belt on here, but let's see what happens. I'm going to use the flexible side. So yeah, I think I'll probably finish working on this with the belt sander at the very end, but I think the microplane rasp is going to make this a lot faster. So back to that. Remember, you don't want to make this a flat bevel. You want this to curve. You want this to be rounded, so don't get too aggressive, you know, with sanding down that edge. Okay, I'm going to finish this off camera because for one reason I need to kind of be where the camera is. Plus, I mean, you can only stand watching me sand or, you know, rasp something for so long, and I'll be back. Okay, I've got this pretty much roughed in, and I don't think this is quite as much curve as the prop that I'm seeing pictures of has. Now I'm a little bit torn because this isn't bad, and the only photograph I have of an actual prop from this angle is obviously a stunt prop. So it may be curvier than the actual prop, I don't know. So part of me thinks this is fine, but I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add another 1/4 inch and make sort of a 1/2 inch on this side to the width of the PVC on this side. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and sort of connect this line that's at 1/2 inch from the end to the inside edge of the PVC. I think that's gonna give me the curve that I want. Also, this edge, which you can't really see, this edge here also is gonna have a fairly large curve, maybe not 1/2 inch on top to a 1/4 inch at the bottom, but at least it's gonna have the 1/4 inch rounded off on both sides. But let me go ahead and work on this part, and then we'll take a look at it when I'm done with the rough part. I finished roughing this all in, and I took a black marker and kind of marked out the rest of the PVC pipe there. So that's all the black that you're seeing there is the PVC pipe, and then the white, of course, is where I've sanded all that black away. And I just did that so that you can see it a little bit better. But this is all roughed in now, and I can go in and smooth everything out. I found that regular file works quite well in this PVC. The the microplane rasp that I have has been worn to the point that it doesn't have quite the same bite that it used to have, but a regular file seems to be pretty good at this PVC, so you can always try that as well. And I don't think I'm going to use the finger sander. I think I'll just go in with sanding sticks to smooth this out. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Let's go to the next finest or least coarse sanding stick that I have. Okay, I have a medium sanding stick. This definitely has a coarser side and a smoother side, so I want to stay on the coarser side at this point. And this is kind of ridiculous for me to have you watch me do this for, you know, this and then flip over to this side and then go one even finer. And I don't know, I'm not even sure that's necessary to do that many. I'm not going to make this, you know, if I was doing Jango Fett's jetpack or Din Djarin's jetpack or something like that where it's going to be shiny metal, then I would go ahead and make this as close to a mirror, you know, smoothness as I could. But luckily with Boba Fett, it's kind of beat up and scratched and doesn't need to be the smoothest, but you do want it smooth enough that it looks like metal after you paint it. So, you know, somewhere in between is good. But when I finish this smoothing out, we can take another look at it. Here's what it looks like now that I've finished smoothing everything out, but you know, it probably doesn't look like anything on camera. I went ahead and took these edges off here as well. I tried to do sort of a 1/4 of an inch round, but it's probably closer to, I don't know, 3/16 maybe or something. It's not quite a 1/4 of an inch, but it's got a nice round curve here. And in this little area right up here where we carved this into it, and it, you know, the rest of the PVC just kind of blended in with this corner, I rounded that as well. And now it's basically just the whole, we have to go over this whole thing. Any rough areas that are really rough or any sharp edges, they need to be softened. So rounded over, not anything like we did here, but just to take any sharp edges off. Like we got a sharp corner right here and here. Those need to be softened a bit. Nothing major, but any sharp edges need to be softened. Any gaps or holes that you find, we'll need to fill those with probably modeling putty, but you can also use caulking. If it's a big enough area, we might want to go ahead and use the baking powder, or I'm sorry, baking soda and thin CA glue. But I think modeling putty is probably going to be the best choice. It looks like there's lots of gaps, but they're not gaps at all. We won't find some of this stuff until after we paint the whole thing with our filler primer, and then we'll be able to see things a lot better. And it's okay to go ahead and fill some of that stuff off at that point as well. You don't want to round these so much that it looks like it's been molded, or like maybe this was a piece that had been vacuum sealed, or vacuum formed. We want there to be nice crisp edges, but not sharp edges. If you can wrap your head around that distinction. I've had lots of super glue drip around and down, and we need to get rid of any of those drips. Some of the caulking will have a little bit, just a sort of a film on here, and we'll need to deal with that as well. It's not actually on camera. Here's where I'm kind of torn, because I don't think you need to sit here and watch me just do this kind of thing over this whole jetpack. We're talking probably, you know, at least an hour worth of just finding rough areas and hitting it. But at the same time, I hate to just skip over an hour or so of work. But I guess there's really no point in showing you that work if it's not something that you can really see, and it's stuff that is going to be different on yours, because you're just going to have to feel around. I can feel right here, you really kind of want this to be the same level as this all the way across, and I've got a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a sunken in spot right here, so I'll need to fill that. That might be better to do with our baking soda and CA glue. And you probably, you may or may not have that problem. I've got, this feels pretty good here, but I've got some areas where this sinks down a little bit, but that's caused because this piece was too short and I had to fill that with caulking, if you'll recall. So you won't have to deal with that, hopefully. But I'll need to fill that with something. It's thin enough that I could probably get away with filling that with modeling compound, or I'm sorry, modeling putty, but I'm also tempted to try to put some CA glue and baking soda there. Either way, it's something that I can sand as opposed to caulking, which I cannot sand. Anyway, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and shut off the camera now so I can work on this. If I come up across something interesting that I think you probably need to see, then I'll come back on and we can take a look at that. But I will definitely need to fill this area here with some CA glue and baking soda. And I'm just going to go over this whole thing and sand whatever I can. Okay, so I've been working on this for quite a while now, and I've basically just been going over everything, feeling pretty much everything. When I feel something that doesn't feel right, like it's a bump or a dip, some kind of a hole, especially like a hole, I'm filling that. If it's a very small hole, then I'm using the Tamiya putty. It's just some kind of modeling putty. If it's bigger or it's something that I can sort of clean out with an X-Acto knife or something to make bigger, then I'm filling that with baking soda and CA glue, and then I'm sanding everything. Sometimes it's a hill or something, and I've sanded that down with the coarse sandpaper or sanding stick, and then done the medium and then the fine until everything has pretty much a super silky smooth feeling to it. I'm not making everything perfect, obviously. I'm not making everything perfectly flat. There's definitely some waviness to parts of it. There is, I'm not trying to take the imperfections out. I want everything to be super smooth because that's going to help translate the metallic appearance to everything. But at the same time, I don't want it to be perfectly straight or anything. So if there are, dips and stuff like that, I'm just trying to make everything really smooth. Those will look like dents when I'm finished. It's going to be fine. This is not Din Djarin's jetpack. This is Boba Fett's jetpack, so you need it to be a little beat up. I could feel, I'm feeling stuff. I can see these seams, but when I feel, I can't feel them. So I covered, I went in with some of the Tamiya putty, hopefully to fill that little seam that was right there, and then I can sand that off. But while that's still drying really well, I want to show you some of the stuff that I thought I need to make you aware of. One of them is down here. These corners on the bottom of this are kind of sticking up and having, a sharp corner right there. So I've just sanded them so that they blend a little bit more into this. So instead of coming down and then having a straight drop, I've kind of sanded it down the last 1/4 of an inch, kind of curving down to smoothly transition into the base here. The other thing that I wanted to show, which I have now started working on, and that's up here. You can see I've got gaps at the top of each one of these dentals, or piano keys as they're called. And I need to fill that. There shouldn't be a gap there. And once again, I'm going to use the Tamiya putty, or you can use whatever type of modeling putty you want to use. If you try to do this with baking soda and CA glue, you're more likely to fill the gaps in between the piano keys or dentals than you will, this little thing in the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some of this putty sort of at the top of each one of these. We'll try these 3 first. I may have to change the way I do things. And I'm taking a palette knife here. You can, use almost anything that's going to be flat and flexible, but a little bit rigid. I'm using this like a putty knife, and I'm just trying to push this into that crack. I want to make sure I don't get any of this in between the dentals. And then once that completely dries, I can sand everything flat. I didn't want to make it very thick, so that's why I'm kind of spreading it out, just like you're buttering toast or something. But when it comes to the little seams down here, I want to spread it out kind of like you're grouting. If you've ever grouted tile, I'm kind of going at it at kind of an angle to push that putty down into the gap. I'm also angling this, so if this is the surface, I'm not going straight, I'm angling it like that so that as I go forward, it kind of pushes it down. And I'll let that dry, and then we can take a look at it after that. In the meantime, I can go ahead and sand this, I think. And I'm not going in with my really coarse sanding stick. I'm using the medium sanding stick. I don't think I need the coarse, and that might actually dig some of the stuff out of that gap. It's a very, very small gap. Excuse me, it's a very small gap. And I've got quite a bit of it here, but I need to remove. Ideally, at the end, we'll just have a slightly dark line going across there, but that I cannot feel with my fingers at all. Seems like I'm always looking for a reasonably clean part of my sanding stick that hasn't clogged up with dust from the Sintra or the putty. And of course you can do this with different grits of sandpaper as well and a sanding block. If you're doing sandpaper, I'd say the coarse would be maybe somewhere between 60 and 120 grit. The medium would be like 400 grit. And the fine would be maybe somewhere above 1,000. The really fine stuff is really almost more like polishing. I can still feel that just a little bit right there. I think I'm going to put just a little bit more on there. Remember, this modeling putty is petroleum based. It's thinned with petroleum based solvents. So you want to do this in a well ventilated area. The fumes will get to you. And when that's had time to dry and this has had time to dry, I'll come back and we'll start sanding some more. I'm back, and this has had plenty of time to completely dry out. So let's see what happens when we sand it. Once again, I'm going with the medium. Sometimes I'll go with the coarse, but I'm very light on force. Now, even before I started sanding this, I could see those lines still. And I think maybe this shrunk a little bit down into those areas. There's a little bit of this dental is a little bit lower than the top part there. So that may be a little bit more to deal with. Yeah, it's much better than it was, but I can still feel something there. So I think we're definitely going to have to put another coat on. think for this done here, I'll have to put enough on that I can sort of blend this lower area to that higher area. So I'll sort of make a ramp there. Let's go ahead and get this cleaned up as well as I can first. Okay, now let's add a bit more. I'll need a bit more for the bottom one. Won't need much of anything for the top ones. For these, I just want to repeat the process again, just to get a little bit more on there. For this bottom one, I want to pull it down a little bit lower. Still don't need anywhere near that much of it. Okay, and that's way more than I need, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it because I want to be able to sand down to where I want it to be. You don't want to leave a lot because that's actually a lot more work than you think it's going to be when you start sanding this stuff. And I just messed that up a little bit. Let me see if I can fix it. Let's see. I think I'm going to need some more putty. Not a lot, just a little bit. Okay, let that cure and then we'll go on from there. I went ahead and sanded this area already and it feels nice and smooth. I can't feel that little gap anymore at all. So we're done with that. And as soon as this can dry completely, we'll be back. This should be dry now. Now, because I've used so much of this putty, I'm going to go ahead and use a coarse sanding stick. But this is one that has been pretty heavily abused and used, so it doesn't have anywhere near the bite that it would if it was new. And I'm going to go very lightly on this. Okay, now I'm going to go with the medium. I'm not really feeling anything there, so I'm going to go with the fine and just kind of give this a bit of a polish. Now, ideally, it would just be a little bit of a line there that you could barely see, and you can see that there's actually quite a bit more of it. But I think what that is, that's just little spots that are a little bit lower, filling in. And even if it's not, and it's actually sticking up higher on the surface, I can't feel it with my fingers, so I think I'm going to be okay. Once this all gets covered in filler primer, it'll be undetectable. Okay, it's all feeling pretty good. Now I just have to do all the rest of these, but I'm gonna do that off camera. Oh, and don't forget, you have to do these as well. So I've gone over these with all 3 grits of sanding stick, so it'll be ready to be painted as well. And I'm gonna keep working on this and I'll be back when I'm done. I've spent the better part of the last several hours sanding everything. Like I said, not necessarily flat, but smooth. Any little pinholes or drops of glue, I wanted to either fill those or sand those off. I found that a fairly large 1-inch chisel and very little pressure, because it's really easy to get a corner to gouge a big scratch in here. But with very little pressure, it's, you can kind of go in there and get underneath drips of super glue and pop those up. So basically, everything feels nice and smooth. I'll just say that. Now, honestly, we won't know what this really looks like until I hit the whole thing with a coat of filler primer, and then you'll be able to see things a lot better. Right now I can see lots of stuff that looks like they're going to be an issue, but I can't really feel them. So we'll see if they're still there after we put the first coat of filler primer on them. Then I'll go in and see if I can't fill those a little better. And with that said, let's start getting this ready. First thing I want to do is, I've got some denatured alcohol here, And I'm going to wipe this whole thing down with denatured alcohol just to try to get any dust that's on there off of it, because it's very dusty. I've blown it off with an air hose, but it's still, we need to make sure there's no dust in there, at least, within reason. And I'm wearing a glove because my hands feel really dry just from all the dust. The last thing I want to do is to have the alcohol dry them out more than it is, or more than they are. Obviously, any painted areas we want to avoid, because even though alcohol is not a big solvent when it comes to paint, I don't want to affect the finish at all in that. So I'm just going to go over these areas. This area that was painted is okay, because I'm not concerned about how it looks at all. So far, it's not too bad. I really expected it to be worse. It'd be a lot easier for me to do this with my left hand with no glove on, but I don't remember those marks, but it feels smooth. So you need to be careful with your rag and don't get a lot of alcohol on your painted surface. And I'm not as concerned with the back, but I want to go ahead and clean off any dust that's there. I didn't bother to do a lot of sanding in the back. If it has a bit of a rough texture, that's okay. But I do want to hit, let me see if I can move this up. I do want to hit this area pretty good and make sure it's good and clean. It can stay rough, but I want it to be clean because I want to put some caulking here just to kind of smooth this out. I'd like for this to be a gentle, smooth shape that kind of feathers into the back of this, so it's not an obvious bevel there, and then it's just thicker at the top and you don't really notice that it's not thick all the way. Because remember, the idea of putting this piece on is to make the top seem thicker, or the whole back seem thicker. I just assume not have this shadow running along here. Let me go ahead and get our Alex quick dry and see if we can't build up some bit of a slope there. Before I fill this in with caulk, I'm going to do something crazy, and I'm going to see what happens if I try to use baking soda and CA glue. A lot of times I'll grab this in the back when I'm moving it around, and I think if it was that hardness of that baking soda CA glue combination, it would be better than if it's got some softness to it that might snag or tear at some point down the line. So it's going to be a lot of building up layers on that, because if I just put a whole bunch of baking soda in there, the CA glue will only sink in so far. So I'll have to build up a few layers, but it will be faster than waiting for the caulking to dry. So let's just see how it works. It might be real easy and be the best idea. Of course, that also means I'll have some sanding to do afterwards, which means I'll have to wipe everything down again, but that's okay. I'm here to learn and experiment so that you don't have to. I mean, learn you have to, but not experiment. And I think I just need to pour some of this out because we're going to use a lot. I don't want this to be too thick. See if I can't spread out any deep piles of it. Now let's see if we can't clean some of the excess. Nothing really precision about this. I just want it to kind of make the bump here disappear in the end. So it doesn't have to be uniform, it just has to be smooth and not make a big shadow. Okay, that's pretty ugly, but maybe we can smooth it out a little bit. Maybe not. Okay, I put one of these little thin applicators on here, not because I need to be precise with this, but because, especially later on when I try to make it, you know, the deeper parts on here, a big drop of glue actually hits that powder and makes a little crater in it. And I'm hoping to be, with this I can be a little bit more gentle. You'll see. Plus I don't have to worry about constantly putting the cap back on while I'm doing this. This little applicator is enough of it stops enough air getting in there that it doesn't harden. Plus, if this clogs up, I can just take some scissors and snip the very end off. This is going to be really rough. And I'm going to start sanding. I think this is going to require a brand new coarse sanding stick. This doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, but I do want to at least get this sort of back edge to be pretty smooth. Mostly I'm just knocking down any parts that are too tall. Okay, I'm going to sand this a little bit and I'll be back. I need to get over in this corner in a little better position that I can't do with the camera there, so I'm going to go over this and I'll be back. I don't know if this is going to be a better angle or not, but we're going to give it a try. And I'm just going to do it again. It looked like some of the thicker areas did actually soak up enough CA glue to be solid all the way through. So I'm going to go with a little, try to go a little thicker this time. This is easily the largest area I've ever tried to fill with baking soda and CA glue. So I am curious to see how it does. Oops, don't do that. I can't really see the tip of this and I just drug it through the baking soda. anytime you use this much CA glue, there's going to be a lot of fumes. So you want to make sure that you're not standing directly over this. I want to try to keep it somewhat away from the latches there, so. Still ending up with the drops themselves making sharp edges and sharp shapes. So starting to, at this point, starting to look a little bit like it's going to be more using the caulk would be a better idea. We can't give up too quickly. The biggest problem really is getting in here to sand with everything in the way. I keep assuming that I'm going to reuse some of this baking soda, but I keep having to remove it. The final sanding won't be so bad because I can come in from this side and get a straight shot at it. But until then, I've got this bump to worry about. Okay, I'm gonna have some rearranging to do, and I'll finish sanding this and I'll be back. Okay, I've got everything sanded. I found that in these little areas in here, it was better to go in with the Dremel tool with that conical sander, you know, this bit, and get in there some of those areas. I just can't get a good angle to come in here and sand this with the sanding stick. I tried the finger sander, but it was having the same problem as the sanding stick, really trying to just get in there to the right areas, but the Dremel worked. I also found some very deep areas that I sanded mostly through, and they were solid the whole way. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and fill this the rest of the way up, and we'll see how that turns out. You can also see some of these areas are really, really jagged. So I'll have to keep that in mind and pay attention to that. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit steeper. I don't need it to come all the way out to here, for instance, especially in these areas. And make sure this gets down into those little jagged holes. Because in the end, I need this to be smooth. If it's got a lot of jagged texture, then I'm going to have to use caulk anyway. So we'll see now if I can make this smooth, then this is a pretty good way to do it. If I can't make it smooth, then you might as well do the whole thing with caulk. Yeah, these areas in front of these clips are definitely going to be the most difficult to deal with. I'm basically just putting the tip of this on the highest spot of the ridge there and trying to fill everything in. The obvious third choice on this as far as caulk or baking soda and CA glue would be to do nothing. This is on the the part that faces your back. So there's definitely something to be said for just not messing with it. I want to make sure that I get these edges because that's the part that's going to be easiest for people to see. Still like this to be a little bit shorter as far as, not all the way down here, maybe a little closer up. Just because it's going to be hard to get a smooth layer of putting the CA glue on top of this. And deal with this. I think in the end that's going to have to be fixed with sanding. Okay, everybody cross your fingers. Okay, nozzle's clogged. Let's trim a little bit off the end. Okay, well, let me just see if I could do it without the tip. The thing is that you need to put enough glue that it will fill up all of that baking soda, but do it gently enough that it doesn't crater the baking soda. Definitely want to make sure this does not run into my switch. Okay, I think that's plenty. There's some areas there they'll have to deal with. It's just weird how some areas it just washes out the baking soda, some areas it fills it up, soaks into it. And we'll just see if I can smooth this up enough for it to be worth the trouble. This is so much easier now that it's all the way up here. But once again, I'm going to go ahead and work on this for a while, and then we'll check back and see what it looks like. Okay, this actually sanded out really easy. I didn't even have to use the Dremel or finger sander or anything. Because this goes directly up against this edge, was able to sand easily, coming in and get complete access to it. It sanded out fine. There's a couple of low spots, but they're not really, I'm not trying to make this a precise way or anything. I just want this to kind of blend into the back so that it's not a real obvious bump when it comes down to. So with all of this sanded smooth and everything, I think we can go ahead and move on to getting this ready to hit it with a filler primer. I've already wiped everything down actually, so let's put a coat of filler primer on this. I've got everything in the spray shelter and we're about ready to start spray painting, but I have to mask some of this stuff off. I don't want to use tape on the painted silver there. So what I've done, and I'll show you what I'm doing the same thing over here. This is just a Ziploc sandwich bag. Same as this is a snack bag because I don't need this much length. And what I've done is I've just zipped the Ziploc most of the way up. I zipped it up as far as it'll go. And I just wrap this around I don't know why I chose to do the easy one off camera and then the one that's going to be more difficult to show on camera. Okay, so wrap that up good. Make sure it's all the way to the bottom. And then I just wrap that with tape. Okay, now that'll keep paint off of that. And I'm very excited to see what this looks like, all one color without all this stuff that's distracting from what it's actually going to look like. What I'm going to use for this is my usual. It's this Duplicolor 2-in-1 filler primer. It's just a primer that also has some body to it, so it fills in little scratches and things so you can sand this smoother. There are sandable primers out there, but this is a little different. This is also fills things as well as being a primer. And we're going to do 3 coats on, as I've learned in the past, I'm never going to get a good coat down below here, down in this area. I just can't get this up high enough for that. So we'll mostly do the front, we'll do the back, and we'll do the bottom in different sessions. I've got a couple of cans of this. I may have to go get more because this is a pretty big job. The areas that I'm worried the most about is trying to get into these little gaps without clogging everything up. So we'll just have to play that by ear and see how it goes. But we'll do 2 very light coats, and then we'll come in with a 3rd coat that's, looks wet when you put it on. Just trying to hit this from different angles. Okay, let's not forget these little bottom pieces. Okay, I'm turning upside down and clear it. Okay, now I'm going to wait 10 minutes and we can come on and put another light coat on. Time is up and it's time for another coat. I'm going to go ahead and put on a respirator because between all the dust from sanding and the particulates from spray painting, it's driving my sinuses crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and put on a respirator. So it'll be hard for me to talk while I'm doing this, but it's just another coat of the same thing. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, wait 10 minutes and we'll come back. Okay, so before I put on this last wet coat, I want to go check some areas where I can see that there's some dust and stuff, or there's little things building up, and I might do a real light sand on this with just the fine sanding stick just to knock off any roughness. Before we do the 3rd one, but let me take a look. This is the fine, and I am putting very little pressure on here.
I'm not really sanding so much as just knocking off any, it almost feels dusty. And I'm just knocking that dust off. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just go lightly over everything, and then I'll be back. Okay, and I didn't really do what you could call sanding. For a lot of it, in fact, I just ran my hand along the surface, just to take off what felt like a sandy surface on there. And then I blew the whole thing off with the air hose. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the thicker, wet-looking coat. Okay, that's one whole can. Luckily I've got this one already ready to go. Now you don't want to put this on so heavy that you start getting runs or anything like that, but you do want to get this to be a nice thick coat. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going and kind of hitting everything from as many different angles as I can. Okay, now this one I'm going to let wait like 30 minutes, and then we'll come take a look at it. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes, and that's plenty of time for this to completely dry. So I was able to lay it down on its front, and now I can spray the back the exact same way. 3 coats, 2 light, 1 heavy, and we'll go and do that. I just realized I hadn't sprayed the back after I did the sort of dusting earlier, so I'm going to do that real quick. I can already see there's a little bit of dust there. It didn't look like it did much, which is probably a good thing. I'm wondering now if maybe I shouldn't cover up the switch. Paint and switch, in your switch is probably not a good thing. Let me see if I can find something to cover that up with real quick. This is just a little disc of Sintra that was left over when I drilled a hole for something else. I'm not sure what, but it seems to be pretty close to just fitting in there perfectly. Might be just a little bit thick. It's going to make it harder to spray behind it. Not sure if you can see it, but for some reason I'm getting a little different coverage on different parts of this, so I may have to give it a little bit extra attention as we go forward. But that seems like a pretty decent light coat. It's hard for me to get different directions like this, but Maybe I should flip it the other way. Okay. Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes, and hopefully this amount of paint will last for that, and then I can go get some more paint.
Okay, let's see if I can, I'll put the rest of this can on there and hopefully I can get a good coverage for everything. Just trying to get all the different sides of those little things. Okay. And I'm gonna run to the store and see if I can find some more of that paint. Okay, got some new paint. Let's go ahead and put on our wet coat. Maybe I should just, yeah, I've definitely got that sandy surface again. Maybe not as bad, there's less surfaces for it here. Yeah, I'm not getting anywhere near as much stuff just sliding off when I touch it. So let's go ahead and hit this with a nice wet coat. Definitely could have painted part of this before I put it together, but I think we'll still be able to make it all work. What I'm talking about is this tiny little space between the PVC pipe and the back there. It's going to be a challenge to get paint in there. Having trouble making this look like a wet coat. Okay. We'll give that 30 minutes and then we'll readjust again and work about painting the bottom. Okay, with the front and the back done, let's go ahead and do the back. Once again, we got 3 coats I'm going to go on. Now, I don't want to paint this bottom part here that we spent so much time at the very beginning of this, getting it the way we wanted it to. So here is the template, and I'm just going to put that in place. So now it works as a mask. Maybe I should put some double stick tape on there to keep it down. I think I will, because I'm afraid it's going to block a little bit of that at the bottom. Okay, so now I've got some double stick tape on there. Let's see if we can get it. I wanted to get it basically in place before I started sticking this down. I don't want to push down really hard because I don't want to have to tear this apart to get it out. Okay, now with that covered up, let's go ahead and spray some stuff. I'm hitting all these edges that face down as well. Gotta be careful in here trying to get that inside of the wood painted, but I'm getting a lot building up here so I don't want to spray a whole lot there. I'll build that up slowly. And I'm also going to get these bottom of all the dentals and stuff down here. It's not just the dentals, but also, you know, the part that the dentals attached to. All the areas that face down, I need to get those. Not sure why that has a completely different texture as everything else. Same with the bottom part of the rocket. And we want to get the underside of this area as well. You know the drill, 10 minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and put another coat on. Another light one. So there are some areas that I'm probably going to have to go back individually and make sure that I've gotten it, like on the fins that pop up, you know, the fins on the rocket, the underside. It's going to be tough to get, you know, the filler primer in there, so I'll have to make sure that I get some in that. It might even require me to take a brush, spray the spray paint into I usually use a small roller pen for, you know, when you're rolling paint, but you can even spray it into the cap of your spray paint. Take a brush and brush the underside just to make sure I get some coating on there, or, you know, coverage. Trying to get the underside of the back. Okay. Make sure I get the, you know, the bottom of that area. I always do that, and then I come back and find out that it's still barely any paint there anyway, so. Okay. I'm in danger of putting too much paint down here and it's going to drip, so considering this is supposed to be a light coat, we're going to stop. We'll give that another 10 minutes and then we'll come back and put a heavy coat on. Okay, let's put on a nice thick wet coat. Okay, we'll let this dry for 30 minutes and we'll take a look at it. I may come out in 10 and spray some more here and then wait another 30 minutes. But once again, we'll take a look at it when it dries. Okay, let's take a look. Felt a little sticky at first, but let's try. I don't want to tear this up because I want to use it again. I suspect we're going to need to use this a few more times before we're finished painting. Okay, this is plenty dry, it feels like. And I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. I mean, everything, you know, having it all one color really makes the whole thing tie together well. Not having all those different little shades of gray made it really hard to see the actual shape of it. But this looks good. There are a few places here and there that I'm definitely going to need to fill. I'm not sure what was going on there, because that's actually circular. That's the PVC pipe there, so that mark somehow got sanded in place at some point. I'll need to probably fill that with a little modeling putty and smooth it all out good. There's a few little spots here that need to be filled, but all in all, it looks really pretty good. So yeah, there's definitely some work that needs to be done here and there, but we'll have to wait for another video for that. As always, if you liked this video or thought it was helpful, you know, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any other videos. And most importantly, if you're still watching this at this point, please leave a comment, even if it's just to say hi. It'll help so much for the channel. The more these videos get interacted with, the more it gets shared with other people, and the more my subscribers can grow. Not to mention that it's really the comments that keep me going, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them down below and I will answer them as soon as possible. But with that in mind, I'll see you next time. Thanks.